Welcome everyone to this Saturday afternoon. We are going to today cover computer-aided design for FTC. So hopefully that's what you signed in for. In a few minutes here, I'll introduce myself and a couple of other items related to today's webinar. For now, what I want to do is just quickly talk about a few ground rules. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and turn off your cameras and mute your mics at the moment. This will allow some bandpass issues, but it'll also make sure our recording is nice and clean. So again, if you wouldn't mind just muting your mics and turning off your cameras, that'd be much appreciated. If you do have any questions as we go through today's webinar, please feel free to just throw them in the chat or just say slow down. We do have a small enough crowd that given the moment, you can unmute yourself to ask the question. But otherwise, if you wouldn't mind just keeping your mics muted until you do need to ask a question, that'd be much appreciated. If you wouldn't mind also, if you could use the chat feature to just put in there your first name, dash, and your team number so we can know what teams are represented here today. So again, if you wouldn't mind just putting your first name and dash team number, and that way we can kind of do a quick count of what teams are represented today, which would be much appreciated. Alrighty, so just to introduce myself if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. My name is Louis Rubo. I am the Team Development Education Specialist with First Nevada. I'm located down in the Las Vegas area, so if you've been to a league meet down here or anything FTC related, you probably ran into me. Worked very closely with Francois down here in the South, along with Grace. Also on the call, we do have Angelo, who's our first senior mentor. He's going to help monitor the chat with questions. Also has a background in CADing, and then as well is our program delivery partner, Scott Duncan. He's on here as well. So if you have any questions about FIRST and FIRST Tech Challenge, please feel free to throw them in the chat. We are recording this, so if you do get a little behind or something that seems a little confusing, you always have that recording to go back to. Usually we have it published about 24 hours to 48 hours after we are done here. Speaking of, the presentation slides were just recently uploaded. They are available for you in our public resource folder. So this is a common folder we use for sharing a lot of our documentation, especially our workshop presentation slides. And if we have any coaches on the call, our coaches, co-owners are on here as well. But a copy of the presentation slides are available for you. And in a moment, I'm going to suggest you download them just so you can kind of follow along with some of the details as we're going. So here's what the plan is today. We have about 2 hours. We'll see how far we can get along in this. I'm really going to kind of assume that you are coming at Onshape as a CAD software pretty much from a new perspective, that this is all new to you. Even if you're coming here from maybe SolidWorks or one of the Autodesk software, this might be a bit new as we look at the different abilities and different tools we use in Onshape. So I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to start with literally how you're going to navigate around Onshape itself. So the controls of actually interfacing with the graphical interface. From there, we're going to talk about what sketches are, and I'm actually going to have you make a sketch of a nice happy face there, a smiling face. That way we can start learning about things like constraints and adding dimensions to our drawings. And the third part, we're going to actually go through actually turning a sketch into a part design. In this case, we're going to follow along with the new idea of a robot sign. So we're going to design a robot sign for our robots. And then I'm going to conclude with just some resources that you might find helpful as you further explore Onshape. And so that's going to be our next 2 hours. Now, if you have a background in CAD, or maybe you've heard a lot about it, there's a lot to be covered, and I'm not going to have enough time to go through everything in these 2 hours. So I'm really going to start from the ground up. I'm going to work at the very foundations and talk about just the most fundamental tools and skills you need to get going with Onshape as a CAD software. So I'll be covering things like sketches, constraints, dimensions. We're going to talk about extrusions, fillets, and even how to export our files so we can print them through a 3D printer. I'm not going to have time to cover a lot of things you can do with Onshape. Things like sweeps, assemblies, mates, simulations, exploded views, drawings, materials, bill of materials. And that's just a short list of the things that Onshape can do, and not even Onshape, but all CADing programs. So this really is supposed to be a crash course, a very quick introduction, a tutorial of getting you started with Onshape that you will be able to go back to your practices with your team and continue to use what we develop here to further do some design elements for your robot and your team. So the idea of this workshop is it's meant to be interactive. I can't or will not just sit here for 2 hours lecturing to you. A lot of the information just won't sink in. So the idea is I really want this workshop to be interactive. And the way we're going to do this is kind of twofold. One is, as I already alluded to, the slides are available to you already. So if you scan that QR code there, you can go and grab the slides and download them. They're in PDF form. That way you have not only my slides, but also all my presenter notes with you, which include all the things I'm supposed to be saying. I might forget a few things, but then you can at least follow along at home. The other thing I'm going to suggest you do is on your computer, actually open up two separate browser windows. One will be for this Google Meet. The other one will be for you to actually use Onshape. As we're going to talk about here in a moment, Onshape is an online CAD program. You don't actually have to install or download anything to use it. It's all done through your web browser. So I want you to be able to follow along at home and actually do the things that I'm suggesting and walking you through. That way you become familiar and you get some ownership of how Onshape actually works. So again, my suggestion here is have two windows open on your computer. One window will have this little Google Meet in it. Inside that window, I'll be sharing on my presentation slides. I'm going to switch over myself to Onshape as we need it. And then I want you to have your own Onshape window open so that you can interact with it. The other thing I want you to take advantage of is with our Google Meet. If you go to the bottom of the screen, there should be a little happy face icon. If you click on it, it allows you to do a little emojis on the screen. And I want to use those that kind of get a feel for how things are coming along. So if everything is good, you might give me a thumbs up, something like this. You know, if you are kind of stuck or you need some more help, just give me a thumbs down to let me know, hey, can we slow down? I have a question or something's just not making sense. And of course, if I'm being funny, you're welcome to do that. It's totally up to you. But I do encourage you to kind of give me these little thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, these pondering faces if you're stuck, so that I know that you have a question or need some more time to work on something. But again, I want to emphasize this really is meant to be interactive. I really want you to follow along at home. I've broken all of the steps down into very small micro parts so that you can see and do for yourself all the things that I'm going to be doing here as well. Righty. So, so far. Well, I'm going to do just a very quick introduction to computer-aided design, what we call CADing. So the idea behind CADing is it is a common method for creating, modifying, analyzing, optimizing designs that you might eventually want to manufacture. So CADing is, of course, very prevalent throughout all of engineering. The entire industrial world uses CADing in some level of form. As an FTC team, you may be using CADing to help design your entire robot. You might be using it to design just a small piece of your robot. It might be to design a little 3D printed holder for, you say, your battery or the control hub, or it might be to hold onto some sort of claw mechanism. Whatever your use is, CADing is a great and really the first tool to helping you design that process. We won't have time to dive into it today, but another great tool you can use CADing for, especially something like Onshape, is you can actually think about how your robot is going to interact with the game elements, and you actually can develop a strategy with your robot before you do any manufacturing. And that's a huge, actually, time saver, even though it seems like it's extra work. It actually can save you a lot of time on the front end if you use a CAD software program to design not only components, but overall the general strategy of how your robot's going to be laid out, how it's going to pass a scoring element through it, how it might pick something off the floor. You might even analyze the motion to make sure the robot stays within the size constraints. These are all things you can do with CAD, many of which we just won't have time to touch on today, but what we're going to talk about today will get you moving in that right direction. So Onshape is not the end all and be all, and it's not the only one on the market. There are a number of CAD software programs out there that teams are using. If you roughly divide them into three categories, there's kind of the beginner CAD programs, there's the intermediate and the professional level. So maybe the beginner ones you might come across are things like Tinkercad or FreeCAD. These are often taught in the middle schools or sometimes at the high school level. At the intermediate level are things like Fusion 360, Onshape, which we'll continue using today. And even at the professional level, SolidWorks is the standard. That is the most common by far one used in the engineering practices. It's also available to our teams, and a lot of our teams do use SolidWorks as well. And then there's, of course, there is Autodesk Inventor, which is very common as well with teams. Any of these are great, and I would suggest, pick your favorite one, go with it, run with it. But for today, we are going to introduce all CADing through Onshape, and I'll describe why here in a moment. It's not necessarily the clear winner. It is not the worst one. It is a very good, solid, performing CAD software program. And so, as we're going to talk about here in a moment, why we're going to use it for today. So before I get to more about Onshape itself, I want to remind you, as a First Tech Challenge team, you actually have access to a number of these CAD programs for free. So if you follow that QR code there takes you to a website, the FTC documentation area. In there is a list of complementary software programs that are available to our First Tech Challenge teams. And if you look at them closely, even though it might not be obvious, things like Autodesk Fusion and Inventor are in there. SolidWorks is in there. So is Onshape is in there. It's just listed by the overall owning company. So Autodesk obviously does Fusion and 360 and Inventor. But then you've got SolidWorks is in there. PTC is actually Onshape. So if you were to click on those links there, the drop-down menu will open up and give you more information how your team can actually get these software programs for free. So if you are more interested in following, say, SolidWorks or Inventor, you are welcome to follow those links there to get them at a later time. Now, for me, and why we are going to use Onshape today is for a number of reasons. I kind of list them out here. One is free, as you can get an educator's version of Onshape free, no matter what. It's really user-friendly from First perspective. They are a partner in many ways with First, so you can get all the elements you need for free. One of the huge advantages of Onshape is there is no software to download. It is all done through your browser. And so as long as you have internet access, you have access to Onshape. Not only that, is because everything is done on the cloud, you can, say, work on your Onshape designs on one computer, close the lid, go over to another computer, open up, sign into your Onshape account, and all your materials is there available to you. So this makes things a lot more easy for our First teams, so they don't have to worry about sharing licenses or making sure they have the right files on the right computer. Onshape is a cloud-based web browser interface program, which makes it very accessible to everyone. There's even a mobile application. So if you're using an iPad or an iPhone, you can actually do Onshape directly on your iPhone. If you are crazy and have really good eyesight, you can do it on something as small as your iPhone. It does work on the iPad very well as well. And the reason I really fell in love with Onshape is they have a wonderful library of tutorials that are extremely accessible and very concise. So you can go in there and learn something in 5-10 minutes that's very beneficial for what you're trying to do. You don't have to sit through an hour-long YouTube video. It's a 4-minute video that shows you exactly how to do it. And they're all sequenced there so you can build up a particular skill. For all these reasons, this is why we're going to use Onshape today. It is free. There's no software to install. It has a mobile component. All your work is stored on the cloud, so you don't have to worry about which computer you're working on. I didn't mention, but there's also real-time collaboration. So it's actually possible for multiple users to work in the same file simultaneously, which is great for teams designing multiple parts of the robot at the same time. And as I said, it's very accessible in terms of its tutorials that you can learn with. Speaking of those, I'm going to just put them up here on the screen for the moment. We're going to talk about at the end of today's workshop more. The Onshape library has a huge amount of learning tutorials. Everything from are you brand new to CADing to, oh, maybe you've done SolidWorks before or you've done Autodesk and you're coming over to Onshape. They also have tutorials for that. And then they even have more difficult, more challenging advanced tutorials for things like when you're trying to design that entire robot and you want to test out simulations with it, maybe do some stress tests with it. They have tutorials on there. And I think it's one of the best parts of Onshape is their extensive support system for you to go in there and learn the different components with it. So I do want to say, as much as I'm selling Onshape, I'm not getting paid to do any of this. This is all I just had to choose a software program for us to learn some CAD today. And Onshape really became kind of an obvious choice for our purposes and needs for this workshop. And so that's why we're running with it. I will also say that Onshape has very much kind of taken a strong foothold within FIRST. So you will find a lot of teams are using Onshape now as well. So there's going to be a lot of FIRST-specific resources out there for you. So I'm going to just pause here and ask if you have any questions before we really get into the meat of today's workshop. Remember, you can just give me a quick thumbs up. That way I know you're still alive on the other end and that you're kind of following along. Sounds good. I know this stuff, the beginning part was pretty easy. Ooh, I didn't know it could do a starburst thing. That's kind of cool. All righty. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to dive into how are we actually going to navigate around Onshape. And I'm going to assume, like I said, that you have no prior knowledge with Onshape, so we're going to start from scratch. So the first thing I want to make sure is everyone gets an account set up. And so if you haven't yet, what I ask you to do is just scan that QR code. I also put it in the chat there for a moment. Let me just recopy this. If you're coming into it after I posted that, if you can follow that link to set up an account, just by a show of thumbs up, how many of you already have an Onshape account ready to go for it? So go. Oh, good. So we actually have a good number of you already are using it. I'm going to just pause for a minute to give some people a couple moments here to make sure that they get a chance to do this. It really is a very quick process. It is free. A couple comments I'll make on here is that when you are signing up for your free account, if you're a student, select student and put your actual school that you attend in there. When it asks for why are you using Onshape, just put FIRST Robotics. It's the common answer and they expect that sort of response. If you're a coach listening, then you will want to put the educator choice under there just to distinguish that from the student part. There's a little bit of back and forth, so that link will take you to an Onshape website where you can create your create your free education account. As part of signing up, they're going to send you an email. You click on that to complete the sign up, and that's where you'll put in your password of your choice to get going. By a thumbs up, it looks like a good chunk of if not all of you have already done that. So it's great news. Okay. So when you sign into your Onshape account, this is your kind of landing page for you. It might look a little different depending on your history with Onshape. There might be a few extra menus opened up, but this is your kind of landing page for it. Now, as I mentioned before, Onshape is a cloud-based service. So you don't install anything. You just go to the website and you sign into your account, and it'll take you to this page. On this page is your way of interacting with your own files. So not only is Onshape a CAD software program, It also does all of the project management for you as well. So all of your files are located here. Again, this is one of the advantages of Onshape in that you can sign into one computer, use Onshape, close out your account there, go over to a different one, sign back in, and you still have access to your files. On the screen there in the middle, there's going to be your folders or your files you have listed for it. Mine's pretty empty at the moment. I actually have a lot of files hidden away in that one folder. They're called Learning Pathways. But down the middle of the page, that's where you're going to see all your files or your folder system that you set up. On the top there, I do have a couple of Windows menus, I should say, collapsed. Yours might be open, so it might make your window a little bit more busy. But there's things like your last open files are listed there. There's also a menu items for getting started with Onshape. So I've collapsed them down to make my introductory window more clean, but maybe yours might show those, and so that's why yours is looking quite a bit different. On the left there are different ways for you to be able to search for your files. So just much like your browser, your system, your OS system, your operating system on your computer, they have this built in there as well for you to find your files. On the top right is your links to things like your account. That's where you can quickly access their help center. Also, their learning center is linked up there. And then on the top left, the Onshape logo is actually a button that whenever you click on it, will always bring you back to this page. So it's kind of like the home button. It's just not labeled that way. Just let you know that whenever you're working within Onshape, if you just click on the Onshape logo at the top left, it will always take you back to this home page, this document landing page for you. So we're going to get started. What I need you to do is on the top left, you're going to click on the Create button, and you're going to select Document. That's going to introduce a new pop-up window. And for the moment, I just want you to type in smiling face as your document. And once you've done that, go ahead and hit Create. So again, I just want you to start a new document. We're going to call it Smiling Face, as you'll see why in a moment. And then just hit Create. And what that will do is it'll take you into a fresh, clean Onshape document. Now, here's what's kind of interesting about Onshape and the way it's structured is we use the phrase document, but it really is much more than that. An Onshape document is actually more like a project center. It can contain not only your drawings in CAD, it'll contain your assemblies, but you can also attach to it things like PDFs. You can put photos in there. You can put other files linked to it. So it becomes more of a project management system in here. And so you'll see that along the bottom, where as a default, whenever you start up a new Onshape document, you actually have two tabs as a default. One is called a part studio, and the other one is called an assembly. We'll touch on those a little bit more as we go on. But basically, every new Onshape document starts with two tabs by default. You can erase at least one of them, but you always have to have at least one active tab inside of an Onshape document. You can add new tabs in here using the plus sign, and in those tabs, you can put all kinds of interesting things. Like I said, you can put everything from additional part studios and assemblies, but you can also put things like photos in there. So if you have a real picture of a robot and you want to reference it, you can put it in there. We're going to take advantage of this a little bit later when we import some parts from Rev Robotics. Also on the top right is a little share button. I know it's a little hard to see on my screen, but you may be able to see it more on yours. You are able to share your documentation with others. So this is a great thing to do as a team, that as one person is developing, say, a design, you can quickly share it out to the rest of the team. In fact, you can set up an entire team system where everyone has all of your documentation shared together. I'm not going to dive into that too much. I just want to point out that this is a great feature for our first tech challenge teams. Wow, Angela, are you using companion mode already? All right, one of the most important things we need to do at the very beginning of our design is we need to make sure we're working in the right units. And so what I need you to do is go up to the top left of that document screen and click on the hamburger menu. The hamburger menu is those 3 horizontal bars. You'll get a little drop-down menu in there. And what you want to select is that workspace units. It's very crucial that what we do is define what units we're dealing with. We need to tell Onshape, are we dealing with inches, centimeters, meters, bentham, I don't know, whatever, angstroms. So once you click on that, that will bring up a new menu, which you can then define all of your units. I'm going to use centimeters. And that's kind of one of the defaults there. It's either centimeters and millimeters are the most common ones using for 3D printing. I know a lot of our part vendors might use imperial units. So you might want to just make sure you're checking that very carefully. But you do want to make sure you know what units you're using when you design this. There's nothing worse than designing an entire part. You put in a bunch of dimensions, you send it to the 3D printer, and it's 10 times too small. And you're like, well, now I have to go all back in there and clean up my units. So do make sure we're set up to use centimeters. The other thing is you can actually make it so that these units are your default for your account. So if you were to go to the very top right of the documentation screen, you can actually click on your My Account settings, and you can go in there and change it so those units are your default at all times. So I've got my Onshape account set up that all of my links are in centimeters and all of my other units are using metric. And so I know that every time I open up a brand new file in Onshape, it always uses these default settings. So it makes it easier. Okie dokie. So one of the biggest challenges we have is you're going to design something in 2 dimensions on the screen, but in reality, it's an object that is supposed to be a 3-dimensional object in the real world. And so one of the struggles and challenges we have, especially as we start learning CAD, is how do we manipulate and understand the different points of view of a CAD object on the 2-dimensional screen when it really is a 3-dimensional virtual object. And so we have to understand our mouse clicks and the different ways to view our object. And so I just put on the screen here the way the default settings are for Onshape. You can actually go into your account settings and change it. So if you're familiar with things like SolidWorks, you can change it over to the SolidWorks settings. Or if you're more familiar with things like Creo, you can use the Creo settings and so forth. But here are the default settings for Onshape. To rotate the view, you're going to right-click your mouse and drag it around, and it'll freely rotate the image of your object. If you want to pan around, then if you have a wheeled mouse, you click on the wheel and you can drag around the mouse and it'll pan around the screen. Or if you don't have a wheel, you can use the control button and the right click, and then it will pan around as well. And then if you have a wheel, you can zoom in and out using the wheel going up and down to go in and out of your view. So this will take some practice there. Just notice that, and it took me a while to figure this out. Get comfortable with right click is your friend. Your right click is going to be your rotate view. And I use an Apple computer, so I don't have a wheel on my mouse. I use the control button to pan around. But I do have the magic mouse, so I can zoom in and out just using that by scrolling up and down. So let's have some fun with that. Here's what I want you to do. Sorry. I also want to say, before we get to the fun part, on the top right of your screen, there is a little view cube. And you can click directly on that view cube to change your view of how you're looking at your Onshape design. So if you were to click on one of the faces, like the front, the side, the top, the bottom, it'll quickly rotate around to that view. You can also click on the corners to get a trimetric view of the object. If you hit Shift 1 through Shift 7, you can also scroll through different views of your object directly that way as well. So to test this out, here's what I want you to do. If you go to that QR code, which I'm also going to put in the link here into the chat, this will open up a brand new file for you in your Onshape account. What you'll want to do is go down to the third tab that says FTC Field Assembly, and you can actually see the FTC game for a couple years ago. So give me a thumbs up if you can start seeing that FTC field. Always doing a nice job. Jace, I'll give you a minute. So what we're going to do here is, on the moment, I'm going to put some elements on the screen, and you're going to do a little scavenger hunt. So what I want you to do is I'm going to put up, what have we got? 10 items on the screen. And I want you to hunt down those 10 items just so you can figure out the different movements with your mouse to get comfortable with it. So here you go. Somewhere on that field are the following 10 items. I'd like you to use your mouse and your keyboard to kind of zoom in, pan around, rotate, try to get a different feel of the view, and see if you can find those 10 items. When you find them, just throw in the chat, found ball, or found gears, or found viewers. Just let me know when you start finding some of these items on the field. Let's see if I can do this with you. So there's my version. So I found a little ducky, but I found one. There's something in there. There's something. Shift 1, 2, like that. If I come up to this little view here, I can also take it and look around this way. Kind of zoom in, pan around. There's an item. So let me go back to our list of things and then let you search for those items. So again, once you find a few, just say, hey, I found blah. Don't tell where everyone is, but just kind of say, I found this item. I found the Allen wrench. I found the Skystone cube. This is a fun little exercise in learning how to use the mouse to kind of change your view of the screen. Oh, I just found the wiffle ball. Oh, I just found the range sensor. What is that little doohickey? Oh. I just found a little orange ring. I didn't realize it was that small. There's a sky stone. Has anybody found the gear yet? Oh, I think I just did. Nope. Oh, there's the gear. So Ralph, okay. On the bottom, there are 3 tabs. The first one's listed as instructions, then pushbot, and then FTC field assembly. If you click on that tab, FTC field assembly, that's the one. So if you clicked on the link above, it should take you directly to that file. So by show of thumbs up, thumbs down, have you found at least most of the items? Nice. I have a call. Oh, good. That's an interesting question. Actually, Jace, don't worry about it. This is the only exercise we're going to do like that. In fact, we're going to wrap it up here. So from here on out, you won't need a separate link to move forward. So it's just this one exercise. Yep. Cool. And this was supposed to be just a little quick, fun little tutorial just to have you kind of play around with viewing the screen. Especially if you're a veteran at FTC, you may remember this game from a couple years ago, and you understand there's kind of a crowd-facing side to the game. There's definitely, the back part and where the alliances are standing. So there's some sort of orientation to it, and you can use your mouse to kind of rotate around, pan around, zoom in and out, and get used to the motions and feel of Onshape using that. So, great. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to start on that smiley face. And so for this, you don't need a link to anything. Just go back to your file that has the original smiley face started up. So I'm going to switch screens here, and I'm going to lead us through this little discussion. So I am here at my main documentation center. I'm going to do a create, just like you've already done. I'm going to say smiley face. So sure, smiling face. I'm going to hit create. And there we are. Hopefully, everyone, you've seen this view. This is your beginning point for starting a new design. So give me a quick thumbs up if we're back, if everyone's back at this point on the screen. Great news. Great news. Remember, if you're not, just give me a thumbs down. Ask a question in the chat. We'll make sure everyone gets caught up. So throughout this presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm also not going to talk about the tools, but also going to start introducing you to some of the hotkeys involved. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by making a sketch. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time here making a smiley face sketch so you kind of get a feel for the tools in Onshape. What a sketch is a two-dimensional representation, a projection, if you like to use that phrase, of what will eventually turn into a three-dimensional object. For our first kind of tutorial here, we're just going to make a two-dimensional smiley face to get used to the different ways and things we can draw in Onshape. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by coming up on the screen to the top left, and I'm going to click on New Sketch. And what will happen is I get a new box popping up here. This is what we call the sketch dialog box. And the first thing it wants to know, and we know it needs some information, is it's written in red here. The name of the box is sketch one. Because it's red, it says we need to know some information. And what it needs to know is which plane we're going to sketch on. And you can see in the middle of the screen, there's 3 default choices to choose from. We can do the front, the top, or the right plane. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the front plane. And all of a sudden, the sketch dialog box no longer has an angry red font. And in fact, it now says front plane on here, and we're ready to go. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to use a couple of quick hotkeys to move things around. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click N for normal. And what that will do is it's going to rotate my view so that I'm looking straight onto that front plane. So I press the letter N. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just press the letter P, and that's going to hide my planes because we're not going to work in 3 dimensions anymore. We're going to just stick with this one sketch plane here in 2 dimensions. So just hitting the letter N and then the letter P, what we've done is then we're now looking normal, and that means perpendicular to our sketch plane. And I hit the letter P, just get rid of those planes. And you can always bring them back by just repeating P, 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 and N will flip you around to the other side. All right, the first thing we're going to draw is a circle for our smiley face. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to come up to the top left, and I'm going to click on this circle right here. And when I click on the down caret next to it, we see there's actually 3 different types of circles. We're going to do this first one, the center point circle. So what we'll do is we'll click that, and we'll turn on the center point. And the way we draw circles with this tool is you first click where you want the center of your circle. So I'm going to just choose that center point. Click once, and I'm going to drag my mouse. And then at some size, I don't know, let's make it this size. I'm going to click the left button again, and all of a sudden I have a circle. So it's a very simple way to draw circles. The shortcut here is if you just hit the letter C, it will turn on this center point circle tool. For now, don't worry about making the circle a specific size. I just want you to have a big fat circle on there. This is going to represent our face moving forward. Next up, we're going to put some eyes on here, but we're going to make them square just so you can learn some new tools here. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the top left, and I'm going to click on the caret down arrow next to the squares. And you see there's a different 3 different types of squares. There is a corner rectangle, there's a center point rectangle, and then there's a line rectangle. We can use the first 2. They're the easiest ones because everything is going to be squared up with our sketch plane. We won't touch the align one for today. That is something, if you have some angles in it and you want to make a square that's kind of tilted, you would use that one. So both of these take 2 clicks. What you do, and I'm going to do the corner rectangle one. What you'll do is you'll click once to start the corner of your sketch, drag it, and then you're going to click again. And that makes a square on our screen. I'm going to do that twice to represent 2 eyes. I purposely made my eyes kind of different sizes and different locations. I'm not trying to match up the size of the squares right now. I just want to draw them on the screen. In a later moment, we're going to go back and learn how to actually make these eyes a certain size. But for now, I'm going to just throw a couple of square eyes on the screen. Notice that the tool, in this case, the rectangular tool, stays lit up until I either click on it again, or I hit the escape key. One of the things about Onshape is it has a persistence feature to it, that it will persist and use the same tool. Or if you want to collect a bunch of items, you don't have to hold down the shift key. It will persist and work its way through it. The square is not showing up. Are you able to, do you have the sketch window still open, Jace? Is the sketch window still showing up for you? Okay, good. Is it black where it says sketch one? Because if the sketch title here is red, that means you haven't defined a face yet for it. Okay, good. And were you able to make a circle? Cool. So then with the square, I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to just click on the square part. Click once on the screen. That'll define one corner of my square, or rectangle, I should say. And then I'm going to drag it until I make another one. And then I'll click again. And you should end up with a blue looking rectangle of whatever size you click at. Did that work for you? Cool, cool, good. All right, next what we're going to do is we're going to add a line down the middle of our face. And what we're going to do that is we're going to come over here, and there's this line tool. I'm going to click on it. Now, the line tool works in two ways. We want to draw one single line for the moment. And so what I'll do is I'm going to click on the screen with my left mouse button, but I'm going to hold down the left mouse button and drag the line down through the face, and then release the button at the other end. Doing so will make one single line. If I want to do a sequence of lines, which we'll talk about in the next slide, then I'm going to click just once. So for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down, and I'm actually going to purposely kind of line myself up so I'm directly above the center point of the face. And you'll see a nice dash, faint yellow line to tell me I lined up. I'm going to click once with the left button, and I'm going to drag all the way down through the bottom and let go. And that's going to draw a single line down through the middle of our face. And I'm going to use that kind of as a reference here as I draw more things onto our smiling face. But for now, that's all I want. I just want a nice vertical line down here. If you accidentally clicked multiple times, then you can hit either the escape button, or you can come up here and click on the line tool again to turn it off. And just like with most things on the computer, Control Z or Command Z will undo your last few steps. There's also an undo up here on the top left that you can click on to undo any of your uh-oh moments. Nice. So in fact, what we're going to do next is we are going to draw a nose, and we're going to draw the nose using that same line tool. I'm going to come over here with the line tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just click once, but I'm going to release click. And then I'm going to drag my mouse, click again, drag my mouse. I don't know, let's put it over here, click again. And then I'm going to drag my mouse so it overlaps with the first button, first point, and you'll see there's a little yellow highlight there. When I see that yellow highlight, I'm going to click, and all of a sudden I've made a triangle. It's a weird looking face, I know, but I kind of doing this on purpose because we're going to use some tools that automatically make everything line up for us in a minute. So does everyone have a weird looking skewed face? Give me a thumbs up. Sweet. All righty. So the lines we've drawn so far are what we will call entities. And they are going to be things that ultimately we want to turn into features or something a part of our main design. However, it's really helpful to put lines into our drawings that their only purpose is to be a reference for us. They're only there for us to kind of measure off of or rotate around or just to kind of make things line up. These are what we call construction entities. And the idea of a construction entity is their only purpose is just to be a reference. They are not meant to be something that gets actually turned into a real object later on. And that vertical line I have down the middle of the screen, that really is meant to be a construction line. It's supposed to only be a reference to tell me left and right side of the face and to measure things off of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. There's a tool over here called construction. You can also just hit the letter Q as your hotkey. When you click on that, anything you draw while that's highlighted is only used as a construction item. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn it off for a moment. I'm going to come back to our line we drew before. I'm going to highlight it so it's yellow. Oops, I got to turn off my line tool. I'm going to highlight this line, and then I'm going to come over to that construction or hit Q, and I'm going to turn it into a construction line. And you see that it's different now. When I click away in the white space, what I see now is that the line is black, but it now has a dash dot structure to it. That tells me that its purpose is it is only there for reference now. It won't be used to actually develop any feature later on. It's only there as a reference for other elements or other entities on the screen. And as you can kind of guess, and I can give you a little foresight, we're going to use that construction line to line up our nose and our eyes and make everything kind of look more symmetrical here in a moment. But for the moment, I just want to make sure we got that line turned into a construction line. All right. The next obvious feature to add to a face is a smile. To do that, I'm going to come up to the top left, and I'm going to click on this thing called the 3-point arc. You can also use the letter A if you like. The 3-point arc, the way it works is when the tool is turned on, you click once to start the arc, click a second time where you want the arc to end, and click a third time to define the radius of the arc. So I'm going to give a little smirk to my person for a moment here. I'm going to click over here, and I have now added an arc to it. Now I got a little sly looking smiley face going on. But that mouth is very thin. So what I want to do is actually make it kind of a larger mouth. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to first make sure I go and turn off my arc feature. And I'm going to highlight that smile. And I'm going to press the letter Q to turn it into a construction line. And I'll click away from it. And I've just turned it into a construction line now, which I can see it's got a dotted dash structure to it. And the reason I did that is I'm actually going to use that little smirking smile as a reference to make what we call a slot. So if you go up to where you see my mouse at the moment, about the middle of the toolbar, there is not a hotkey for this. If you kind of go to that bumpy looking thing that says offset, click on the caret next to it, you get a drop down for the slot feature. Right. What I'll do is I'll first turn on the slot command, and then I'm going to come down and highlight that smirk. And I'll just click again just to turn it off. And all of a sudden now I have kind of a clown looking face. But what I've done is I used that construction line arc to define the middle of a slot. So now my mouth has some more thickness to it. You'll notice also a number came up here. Don't worry about that number. That is just the radius. We're not going to change that for the moment. Let's see, Jace, let's go. My nose is in the mouth. Yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about Jace. The line that you got, your eyes and nose and all that could be overlapping at the moment. We're going to fix that in a moment. But again, that slot tool it's in the middle of the toolbar. It's unmarked, really. It's normally looks like that offset one. It's next to the scissors. What I need to do is actually click on the caret next to it, the down caret, and choose the slot there. Good, good. And then the idea is you will click on that line, that construction arc that we've did, and that will now turn you into a nice little smirk. Cool. Nice. And then I can click on that tool again to turn it off, or I can hit the escape, and we're all good. So by a show of thumbs up, how we doing? Has everybody got some wonky looking faces going? Like it. And I did purposely draw my face like he's been smacked around a little bit, because what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you what we call constraints. That what we'll do is we'll start referencing different parts of the face to each other so that they force each other to have qualities that are equal to or aligned to make our face kind of clean up and look better. So the constraints themselves are all identified and located in the toolbar up here. They are in this part on the right. They go everywhere from that vertical dash there where it says coincident. All of these are what we call constraints. They're all ways to force entities to have similar properties of some fashion or form. So what we're going to do is we're going to constrain a few things here to make our face look a little bit normal. So the first one we're going to click on is actually this equals one here. It does have the hotkey of E. And what we're going to do is we're going to make our eyes more equal so they don't look so wonky looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the equals constraint by clicking on it. And I can see it's now lit up to be blue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click the top of my left eye, and I'm going to click the top of my right eye. And you notice what happened. It forced the two eyes to now have the exact same width. And in fact, if I hover over them, if I turn off the tool first, if I hover over them, I see these kind of weird looking symbols. Those symbols there represent the constraints that are being applied to that segment. So there's actually a parallel one because it is a rectangle. And now there's an equal one that tells me that that segment is being forced to equal in size to the other segment on the other side on the other eye. Let's use the equal constraint again. And I'm going to make the height of the eyes the same as well. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that equal constraint on. I'm going to click on the bottom of my nose. And then I'm going to click on one of the sides. And that's going to force those two sides of the nose to be equal. And in fact, I'll do it again. I'll click on the bottom of the nose, and I'll click on the left side of the nose. And what I just made is an equilateral triangle, one that has equal size on all of it. So now my nose, although it's still kind of twisted, I now have my nose so that all the sides are of equal length. Now, what I can also do to check that everything's working out, if I go to my dialog box over here and I say show constraints, it actually shows all of the constraints that are on my sketch right now. And you can see there's a lot of them. Oh, how do you delete an object? Good. So first off, make sure you don't have any of your tools on. And you can highlight the object like this. If I do that and I see how it's got the yellow bar and I hit delete, it'll get rid of that segment. And sometimes you really don't want that. So I'm going to undo that. If you click and drag, you can highlight multiple things and hit delete, and that will get rid of it. So if I wanted to get rid of that eye, I can click and drag it and delete it. So what you'll do is highlight an object like I did there. It'll turn yellow, and whenever it's yellow and you hit the delete key on your keyboard, it gets rid of it. Did you put 3 eyes on your person? It's not deleting. What are you trying to delete? Is it one of these features we put on? Make sure you don't have anything selected on your toolbar. You want to make sure all of your tools are turned off. So you might have to hit escape. And okay, so what are you trying to delete that's not deleting? Another mouth. Okay, so in this case, what I might have to do, this could be tricky because the mouth is so big. Again, Onshape uses persistence, so you don't have to hold down the shift. All you have to do is click on things. So if I click here, click there, I can gather up all the things I want to delete. So just click on the items you want to get rid of. They should turn yellow like my mouth is here. Once they're all yellow, hit the delete key on your keyboard and away they go. Oh, good. Good. For just where I was at a moment ago, with this show constraints highlighted over in the sketch box, I can see all the constraints that are visible on the screen. Or they're being applied, I should say. You can go and mouse over them, hover over them, and it kind of gives you an idea of what the constraints are. If you wanted to get rid of a constraint, you can just highlight it and hit delete, and it'll get rid of it. Turn that off for a moment. Very nice. So we're starting with kind of cleaning up our face. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to use what's called the coincidence constraint. The coincidence constraint forces things to line up with each other. So the coincidence constraint is located right here. It's the first constraint in the list. You can use the hotkey I to turn it on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the top of the nose right here. I'm going to make the top of the nose line up with that center line. So the way I do it is I first click on the top of the nose. You see it's yellow. I'm going to click over here. And all of a sudden, I force the top of the nose to be coincident. So that means I've now lined it up to do that. Now, the other constraints are still in effect. So the nose is still an equilateral triangle. All the sides are still equal. What I'm telling Onshape is I want that top of the nose now to line up to that construction line. Yep. The next constraint I want to do is the same coincidence. I'm going to leave it on. But if I look at my mouth carefully, there is a dot just living out here in the nowhere land. That dot is actually the center of the curve for the mouth. What I want to do is click on that dot there, and then I'm going to click on the very middle of the face. So there's that circle in the middle there. I'm going to click on it, and I'm just forcing the center of the smile to now line up to the center of the face. That was a little tricky because that little dot just kind of seems almost like a mistake, but it's actually the center of curvature for the arc of the mouth. And using the coincident tool, I'm forcing it to now be the center of the face lined up with the center of the curve of the mouth. So in fact, what it is this arc that I have highlighted in yellow at the moment. If I were to complete the arc, it would be a circle all the way around the face that would be centered at the very middle. Cool. Next constraint, what I'm going to do is called the horizontal constraint. There's actually a pair of them. There's horizontal here and there's vertical. They work in the exact same fashion. For our smiley face, we're actually only going to need the horizontal one. What this one does is it forces our entities to be lined up along a horizontal line. We're going to apply it in a number of ways. So the way this tool works is you start by turning on the horizontal constraint. Then you click on the first thing you want to line up, and then the second thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the bottom of the left eye. I'm going to click there. I'm going to line it up to the bottom of the right eye. I'm going to click on that spot, and you notice all of a sudden the eyes are actually leveled. I've forced a constraint that says the bottom of the eyes are actually going to be lined up. I'm going to leave the horizontal constraint on. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the left corner of the mouth over there. I'm going to click on the construction line. And then I'm going to click on the right side of the construction line. And when I click that, it's going to force the mouth to be nice and level. So it goes all the way through now. Both sides are now constrained to be at the same point along each other. So far, we've used the horizontal constraint where we click on two different points and it forces those points to be lined up horizontally. If I click on a line like the bottom of the nose and just the line itself, the horizontal constraint will force it to be parallel to the bottom of the sketch. And all of a sudden, my face is looking somewhat normal. We're almost there. Almost there. How's the thumbs up looking? Has everybody got a face that might look something like this? I mean, you might have some overlaps. You might have different size eyes, different size mouth. That's okay. We're gonna fix it up here in a minute. If I'm done with my constraint, I'm gonna hit either the escape key. I'm gonna come back over here and click on the constraint, turn it off. We have one last constraint we want to do. Oh, you know what? I take that back. I forgot to do one. It's an important one here. I'm going to go back to the horizontal constraint. There's one I forgot to do. I'm going to take the top of the nose and I'm going to make it actually lined up to the bottom of the right eye. Boink, like that. Oh boy, does that look goofy. That's okay. If you look at people's faces, the top of the bridge of their eyes, the top of the bridge of the nose is about the bottom of their eyes. That's how our glasses work. Okay, good. So the next constraint I want to do is called the symmetry constraint. It's over here. It kind of looks like an. That's okay, Ralph. That's okay because in a minute we're going to fix it. Your mouth, you may have to zoom out. Your mouth may have gone off the screen. Yep. So if you zoom away, you might see. Oh, your nose disappeared. Interesting. So, because you should have it lined up that all three of these dots are all lined up now. That constraint should be forcing the nose to be lined up with the bottom of the eyes. And our earlier coincident constraint of the top of the nose on this line, same thing happened there. Interesting. Let's hold on to it for a moment and let's see if it actually will fix itself when we do these other two. One more constraint and then we start putting dimensions in there and it should start fixing itself. Just to make sure everyone how you did that constraint, if I undo this, the horizontal constraint, when I had my eyes a bit away from the nose, is the first thing I did is I clicked on the top of my nose, and then I clicked on the bottom corner of the right eye. Blink, and it goes like that. All right. So Jace, how I made the mouth, I'm going to turn this off real quick. How I made the mouth is over here. I went to the 3-point arc, or I can use the hotkey A. I'm going to do it off to the side here. I'm going to click once, click twice, click a third time, and that made an arc for me. Then what I did is I used the construction tool. I'm going to click on I'm going to click on that arc. Oops, excuse me. I got to turn off my drawing. I'm going to click on there, turn it into a construction tool, a construction line. And then the slot was next to the scissors. To the right of the scissors is the slot tool. When you click on it, I can then click on that line and it draws a kind of bubble mouth there. And then when I click away, it makes it. And then as someone was asking earlier, if I want to get rid of it, I can click and drag across that whole area. Once I see it's all yellow, I can hit delete and away it goes. All right, let's try getting these last constraints in there and these measurements, and let's see if everyone's nose and mouth and all show up again. So the last constraint I want to do is I'm going to do the symmetry constraint. That one's located here. What the symmetry constraint does is it forces objects to be the same distance away from a line or a reference, but on opposite sides from it. So it builds some symmetry. So I'm going to turn on the symmetry one. Now, the very first click is really important. The very first click with the symmetry tool defines the line you want to be symmetric about. So in this case, I want to make my eyes symmetric about the middle of the face. So the first click is going to be on that center construction. And you see it kind of went bold. My second click will be on the first item that I want to make symmetric. And my third click will be on the other item. And boom. All of a sudden, everything now is symmetric. Well, at least not everything. Those items are now symmetric. So what I made was the inside of the eyes symmetric about that vertical line. So I'm going to undo those so I can walk through it again. Oops. I'll undo that much. I went to the symmetry tool. First click was on the line that I want to be symmetric about. Second click was the first item that I want to make symmetric. And the third click was the third item I want to make symmetric. And then I'll turn off my tool. Now my face looks like it's getting somewhere. Oh, if your lines are red, I'm glad you said that. If your lines are red, what's happening is you have constraints set up that are conflicting with each other. Onshape, if you want to think of it as like Onshape has got all these mathematical calculations going on. It's got a list of constraints it's trying to apply to your drawing. If you have red, that means some of your constraints are conflicting. It's impossible for it to figure out how to do this constraint and that constraint at the same time. So the easiest thing to do is Control Z backwards a little bit. It takes some practice. It does, to kind of get to the point where you know how many constraints you should have in there. If the other thing you can do, as I'm showing here, if you put your show constraints on, you can highlight a constraint by clicking on it. And if you hit delete, that constraint goes away. And that can help you figure it out. It is very much like debugging a code. You kind of have to play around and figure out which constraints are conflicting with each other to figure out how to get that redness to go away. All right. At this point, I put all my constraints in there that I want. And if you think about it and step back and think of the design process, the constraints I put into my drawing are really constraints kind of related to the actual human face. The eyes are symmetric. Oh, thank you, Nanami. That's true too. Yep. As you put in there, blue is too few constraints. And we're going to talk about that. You see a lot of blue on my drawing right now because I haven't told it sizes yet. Black is fully constrained, which we're going to get to in a moment. And red is, oops, I went too far. Yeah. So where I was at, the constraints I applied to here kind of mimic real life. You know, we do have our eyes symmetric about the middle of our face. Our nose is kind of symmetric about the middle as well. The bottom of our nose is flat compared to the ground. The corners of our mouth are kind of lined up with each other. Everything is down the middle. So we put all the kind of major constraints associated with the human face. What we haven't yet decided is how big is our face. Earlier, we set our default units to be centimeters. So when we start putting sizes into things, it's going to be measured in centimeters. All right, to add size to our face, we're going to come up here. I'm going to first just do a quick glance. None of my tools are turned on. Nothing is highlighted in blue. If it were, like those trim, I can just click on it and turn it off. I'm going to go to the dimension tool. It's got a hotkey of D. The dimension tool allows me to apply dimensions to my drawings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put dimensions onto things. So I'm going to click it to turn it on. The first dimension I'm going to do is I'm going to set the size of the overall circle for my face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go until I hover over the edge. You see it turns yellow. I can come over to this side. I'm going to turn yellow. I'm going to click on it, drag away to wherever I like to go. Click again, and I highlighted a box, and I can now type in the dimension I want to apply here. So I want to put 15 centimeters, and I just made my circle 15 centimeters in diameter. Now, a couple of things about that. First off, you see that there is no units written with the number. I have to remember going back that I set up my units earlier, so 15 there reminds me I have to know that it's in centimeters. Like I said, it's important to know how your document is set up so you're not doing millimeters versus centimeters versus inches versus miles. Unfortunate. The other thing is, I'm going to put in the notes, notice that when I gave this circle a size, all of a sudden it's now represented in black. That's because I have now constrained it to have all of the constraints associated with it. And in this case, it was missing a size. Once I define the size, I'm ready to go. Next one I want to put in is I'm going to constrain, I'm going to give a size to the eyes. So with my dimension tool still turned on, I'm going to click, let me turn off these constraints. There we go. I'm going to click on the top of the eye. You see it's yellow there. Click, I'm going to just drag my mouse up, and I'm going to click up here. I'm going to type in a value of 3 centimeters. I just made my eyes 3 centimeters wide. I'm going to do the similar thing on our side of them. I'm going to click on the side of the eye. I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to set that to 2 centimeters. This one on my drawing is going to be a little tricky. I'm going to take the inside. I'm going to have to turn this one off or actually make this smaller. Just because the way my drawings have worked out, I'm actually going to remove that one. I'm going to make a dimension between the inside of the eye and the there to be 2 centimeters. There. I think I just made my person cross-eyed. Clean that up. I know, right? I'm gonna zoom in here. There we go. So what I did is I just resized my eyes because now I'm going to use my dimension tool. I'm going to click on the inside of the eye. I'm going to click on the vertical bar and drag up, and I'm actually going to force this distance to be 2 centimeters. There we go. Got a nice distance there. Oh, it's actually backwards. Then I'm going to take this one and make it 2 as well. That's the problem, is my eyes are crossed. There we go. There we go. So what I have done is I've set the distance between the middle of the line of the face and the inside of the eye to be 2 centimeters. Because I have a symmetry constraint that automatically push the other eye to the left the same distance. So I don't have to specify that distance over here. I specify the height of the eye and I'm good to go. I can then continue putting dimensions on here. I can put the side of my nose to be 4, make it a little bit smaller. What I'm going to do, this one I'm going to have to zoom in quite a bit. I'm actually going to put the distance between the top of the nose and the center to be 2. And that will make it look more normal. And then the last thing I'm going to measure is I'm going to put the dimension from the center of the circle to the top of the corner of the mouth. I just turned off my tool. Oh, I'm going to do the radius of my circle here. I keep turning my tool. There we go. Radius of this is going to be 5. And then the last thing I'm going to do is put the corner of my mouth at 2. So I know I just did a lot there. I'm going to stop and I'm going to leave this on the screen to walk through all the steps of what happened. In short, what I did is I took the dimension tool up here with the letter D as my hotkey. What I did is I then went through the face and I gave all of my entities a dimension to them. In fact, I made this one 3, my regular drawing. So I made the width of my eyes 3, the height of my eyes 2. I set the eyes 2 centimeters away from the center. I took the top of the nose and I made it 2 centimeters above the center of the circle. And I took the top of the corner of the mouth to be 2 centimeters below the center of the circle. And I set the radius of my smile to 5 centimeters. When I now look around my entire face, I notice that there are no longer any blue lines. Everything now is black, which indicates that I've now fully constrained everything on my drawing. Now, you may or may not have this. As a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, let me know how you're sitting with this. As you saw, even I tripped up a little bit, quickly going through. The eyes kind of got crossed. trying to figure out which lines are crisscrossing. It takes a little bit of practice as you get through this. That's okay if you haven't gotten here. One thing I'll show you really quick is a check. If I click anywhere on the face that's not inside the eyes or nose or mouth, I turn the whole face kind of yellow. Down here is a number. That number represents the square area of my face. If you put the exact dimensions in that I have, it would come out to be 131.459 square centimeters. If you're not there, that's okay. What I really want you to get to at this point is an understanding of how these constraints work with each other, how the dimensions then will set the size of your drawing and your sketches, and how that will then set you up, as we're going to talk about in a moment, drawing out a more detailed feature. If you don't have this, that's okay. The main point is I want you to get kind of a little bit familiar with the tools. It does take some practice using the tools. You're welcome to download the slides for this presentation and follow through and recreate it. Looks like Benjamin, you're not got there. That's good. To learn this. And the key, again, it's not so much did you match my numbers? It's more about, are you familiar? Are you learning about the different tools involved? Sweet. Well, here's what I want to do. We are running a little short on time. So what I want to do is I want to switch over and we're going to do another project. And if you didn't get this, again, don't worry about it. It was a good little learning activity. The next one actually is going to turn out to be a little bit easier. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to switch to my presentation real quick. All righty. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to make a three-dimensional object. And specifically, what we're going to do is we're going to take the new robot sign rule from the competition manual, and we're going to design a robot sign for us to potentially 3D print. This one's a lot easier because, well, it's just a rectangle. And even though it's got numbers in it, it's actually kind of really easy to do this. So to do this, we're going to start off by actually reading the robot game manual. This year, we do have to use a robot sign. The robot sign is going to be our way of indicating our team number as well as our current alliance. So we're going to actually have to have a set of these. We're going to have one in red, and we're going to have one in blue. The robot sign is going to be something that we have to mount onto the robot, but we're also going to have to take it on and off between matches, because as you switch from the red or blue alliance, you're going to have to change out your robot sign to indicate that. So a 3D printed robot sign is pretty helpful to have. And so we're going to walk through how to do that. Now, if you read the competition manual closely, there are specifications for the minimum size for a robot sign. Now, in the competition manual, it is written in imperial units, inches. We're going to do ours in centimeters. And so I'll give you the conversions as we go. They are written in the manual as well. So the competition manual, although this graphic is shown in inches, they're actually specified as well as in centimeters inside the manual. So for example, the width of our sign is going to have to be at least 16.5 centimeters, and the height has to be at least 6.4 centimeters. All right, so let's design this. And what we're going to do is go ahead and we're going to go back into our lobby. I'm going to switch over. I'm going to go back over. I'm going to click on the Onshape logo up here. That will take me back into my document center. I'm going to hit create new document. I'm going to call this robot sign. And I'm going to create a robot sign document. So I'm now taken back to a fresh new document. First thing I'm going to do, and we always do this in non-design, the first thing we do is we start with a sketch. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to hit the sketch button. And remember, like before, we see at the top of the sketch dialog box is red. That tells us the first thing we got to do is actually select the plane. So like before, we'll select the front plane. And then I will hit the N key for normal. That'll give us a nice front view. You can also just click on the front on our view cube up here, and then I'll do it as well. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just hit the P button, and that'll get rid of all those planes. It kind of makes things a little bit more clean to view. Now, a robot sign fundamentally is just a rectangle. So I will come over here, and I'm going to select my rectangle tool. But for this one, I'm actually going to use the center point rectangle. The reason is I'm going to click on the center of my sketch, and I'm going to draw off of it. That way I know that my drawing here is symmetrical with the sketch plane, and it's referenced off the origin. Once I drag it to some distance, I don't care necessarily what size, I'll click. And notice the first thing I can do is I actually can start typing in the value I want here. And so I'm going to put 16.5 centimeters. And then I'm going to click over here and I'm going to put in my 6.4. And now I actually have a slab in my sketch that has the dimensions that are required for our robot sign. Thumbs up if you're with me so far. Yeah, 1, 2, good. Very cool. Like I said, this one's actually going to turn out to be an easier drawing in the end. Now we're going to do something we didn't do with our smiley face. We're actually going to come over here, and at the top of the sketch box, we're going to click on this green checkbox. What we're going to do is we're going to tell Onshape, I'm done sketching. This is all I wanted to do in this sketch, and I'm going to confirm it. So what I just did is I had to say, hey, Onshape, that's all I needed to draw. I'm done. Now what I'm going to do is I kind of want to change my view. So I'm going to come over here to my viewing cube at the top. I'm going to click on this top right corner, and I'll kind of get this trimetric view now of my slab. Now keep in mind, we've only made a sketch so far, and our sketch is just a two-dimensional projection of something that we're going to stretch out and make it 3D. And in fact, that's the first thing we want to do is make this thing 3D. And the way we do that is we come up here on the top left and notice that these tools are different. Because we're no longer sketching, what we're actually doing is called features. We're going to add features to our design now. So I'm going to click on the very first one listed here, which is extrude. You can hit Shift E as a hotkey. And when I hit extrude, I get a new dialog box. And again, it's red at the top. And I'm going to do that off in a moment. I first need to do is I need to tell it what surface I'm going to extrude off of. So I'm going to click on that sketch. And then notice it just kind of quickly added some thickness to it. I can change that thickness in two ways. One is I can click on this arrow and drag it in and out, and I can do a live adjustment. Or I can click over here and type in a number. And in this case, I'm going to make it a 0.5 centimeter thick, 5 millimeters. The blind setting here tells me I want to put an absolute value of how thick I want it to be. The other options were if I had something more complicated, I could actually have it extrude out to some other surfaces or whatnot. Blind, just for your knowledge, just says make it up that distance. The other thing I just want to point out for the moment is we're going to add a new thickness. All right, the dimensions of the, it's over here. Thank you. 16.5 centimeters by 6.4 centimeters. There we go. I notice now I actually have a three-dimensional object. I have a nice thick slab that will be the foundation of our robot sign. First thing I want to do is actually want to etch my team number into it. So what I'll do is I'm going to click on the face of the slab. You see it's all yellow there. I'm going to hit the letter N, and it's going to spin it and rotate it so that I'm looking straight on it now. Then I can click away. Now what I'm going to do is kind of interesting here. I'm going to click on a new sketch. And it's going to ask me what sketch plane. Again, it wants to know what's the sketch plane. Well, I'm going to click on the face of this. And I'm actually going to use the face of the slab as my new sketch plane. And I see that over here. It says face of extrude 2 as my sketch plane. Now I'm going to use a new tool we haven't talked about yet, the text tool here. The text tool allows me to actually write text onto my sketch. Now, what I mean by this is I don't mean like a comment. I mean, literally, I can make letters or numbers onto my sketch. So when I click on it, I'm going to now click and drag a box that will allow me to type in text in that new window. And that text will show up on my sketch. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put the team number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is not a real team number. And I'm going to change my font to Roboto. Seems appropriate. Roboto. Roboto. Maybe I should say Roboto. Sure. And I'm going to hit the green check, and boom. I got numbers on my screen now. Okay, so the way I did that is let's undo this. So the way I did that, Ralph, is I'm going to come up here, and there's a text option on the toolbar. Click on that. Click and drag in the sketch, release, and that window will pop up. And then I can type in my numbers that I want. And hit okie dokie. Now you can see already the numbers are kind of going off to the side. We can fix that a little bit. What we notice is when those text numbers, when the text went in there, it put some construction lines in with it, and then put a vertical construction line in there for us. If I use my coincidence constraint, I can take that construction line, click it, and then click the center of my sketch. And all of a sudden, the numbers are now centered on this sketch point. Now, things still don't look good because the numbers are stretched off the edge. That's not good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in over one of the numbers, right-click. I got to turn off my tool first. I always forget to turn the tool off. Right-click, and there is an edit text option. What I'm going to do is actually change to a different font. If I go to this Bebas New, hit OK, it actually fits the numbers on here. Now, here's the thing. We've got some numbers on our slab, but when we go back to the competition manual, there's some more rules we need to know. One of the rules is we have to have at least a 1/4 inch space around the number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put my dimension tool. And I'm going to put a dimension between the top of the number. Click there. I'm going to click here. And I'm going to put in a dimension over here that represents a 1/4 of an inch, which is 0.64 centimeters. What I just did is I defined the distance between the top of my slab and the top of my numbers to be that 0.64. So that will satisfy the competition manual in terms of the space at the top. Visually, I can see I'm good on the left and the right, and the bottom, it turns out it's about the same for the moment. But I also need to make sure my numbers are at least 2 inches tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my dimension tool again, and I'm going to set the vertical height of this to be 5.1 centimeters. That way I know that my numbers are exactly 2 inches tall, and I should be able to pass inspection this way. And as we discussed before, everything is black, so I've done all my constraints, and I'm looking pretty good. Thumbs up if you're with me so far. All right, so Jace, the thing that's important to make sure you're in a sketch. You have to be in the sketch itself. If I'm not in a sketch, there you see up here, there is no text options. So what it was is I was inside of the sketch, which I can see by my sketch dialog box. It's actually one of the tools you're allowed to use inside of a sketch. Yeah, and that's important there, that you have to actually be sketching in there, because what I'm doing is I'm sketching. If you want to think of it, if you are a woodworker, what we're essentially doing is we've now taken a piece of wood, and what this text does for us is, like with a pencil, drawing the numbers on our wood for us to later either carve out or we're actually going to add material to. That's what this text feature is doing for us. It's just like writing with a pencil on wood just to get those numbers in there. Yeah. But to see that text option, you have to be sketching to do that. And in fact, this is all this I want out of this sketch. So I'm going to actually hit OK. It looks weird. You can kind of faintly see the numbers in there. If you come over to your view cube and you click on the corner and you kind of go in that trimetric view, you can see the numbers are faintly there because, again, we just basically told Onshape, let's just pencil some numbers on. Here's what gets really kind of pretty looking. What we're going to do is we're going to use that same extrude tool as before. So I'll click on the extrude tool. And it's going to ask me, first off, it's red up here. It says, what do we want to extrude? Well, I'm going to come over here. And what I can do is actually, there's a couple ways I can do this. The easiest way is actually to go to the left and click on Sketch 2. And what it does is it extrudes all of Sketch 2 for me. Then I can do is decide on my depth. Remember, we put the original one at 0.5 centimeters, so let's do a 0.2. And notice it kind of, I mean, it's a little hard to see it, but you can see that how the numbers are now embossed. They're actually sticking out of the slab a little bit. If I wanted to engrave them, I would come over here to this arrow and then just click it once, and all of a sudden they're engraved. And I just engrave the numbers into it. And I'm done with that. I can hit the OK button. Oop, what happened to my extrude? Oh, shoot. Very important thing I forgot to tell you. When you're doing the embossed version, where the numbers are sticking off of the slab, you want to have the add feature turned on the extrude, because what you're doing is you're adding material to it. You're making the numbers come off the slab a little bit, so you're adding on to the slab. When you engrave, when you go into the slab itself, you actually want to remove material. So I need to click on the remove part. There we go. And then hit OK. Then it actually has it kind of engraved in there. Now, one of the things I can't do in Onshape is I can't tell it to, well, we'll talk about it in a moment. We can make it look colorful, but when we 3D print it, it's up to us to actually paint these numbers in some fashion or form, or we can use a dual nozzle 3D printer and we can do it that way as well. But what I've now done is kind of inset or outset those numbers. In this case, I'm gonna just leave them as an engravement. So now what I have is a slab with my team number engraved into it. What I need to do next is mount it. And here's where it gets a little bit fun. As if this hasn't been a fun thing already. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go to the Rev website. I'm going to go to the Rev website and I'm going to grab this part off the Rev website. So let me put this in the link here, in there. Oop. Sorry. Why am I not? Oh, there we go. Ah. Let's try that one more time. There we go. Just use that link there. Oh yeah. So Jace, let's make sure. Yep. Let's go back into it. Make sure your depth here is a number smaller than the thickness of your slab. So if you were following what I was saying before, your slab was 0.5 centimeters thick. I made my depth 0.2 for this extrusion. That way it only goes in partially into my slab. If I were to make it bigger, like if I were to do 1 centimeter, it would cut all the way through it, because my depth is deeper than my actual thickness of my slab. So I typed in the depth value there a number that is smaller than the actual thickness of the slab. Oh, crud. I wasn't sharing my screen. Sorry, here it is again, so you can see that. On here, when you're doing the extrusion, you got to make sure to type in a depth value that is smaller than the depth of your slab. So if I put in a big number, it cuts all the way through my slab. It actually makes it so I can see through it. Right. If I go in there and I make the number smaller than my slab, it only engraves into it. So the key is that that depth number there you've got to put is appropriate for the thickness of your slab. Okay, we are running a little short on time. Let me do this real quick. All right, so if I went to the Rev website and I go in there and I scroll down on that page, what you will find is there's a file called something.step. You want to download that file to your computer. That file is the CAD file from Rev for that C channel. Then what I'm going to do is inside of Onshape, I'm actually going to go to the bottom left of the screen, and I can add the part into my document. So what I can do is I can come down here on the very bottom left, and I hit the plus sign, and I'm going to say import. And I'm going to import that file I just downloaded from Rev. Now, this part is a simple part, so it really doesn't matter which of these two you do. I'm going to do the right side because if it was a more complicated part, it would combine everything into one simple file. Just out of habit, I'm going to do that. And notice I can turn off this dialog box now that it's improperly imported. And what I can see is I have new tabs down here. One of those tabs is that Rev part. If I hit normal, hit the end button, oh, excuse me, hit the place, hit normal. Or I can do it on my there. I can get a nice normal view to it. Without clicking on anything else, what I'm going to do is hover over the part, click on one of these circles, and on the bottom right, I find out it has a diameter of 0.32 centimeters. Put that in a chat so we can remember it. If I click on a second hole nearby, what I'm now told on the bottom right is the distance between the holes is 1.600 centimeters. So I can use that information to actually add holes to my sign. Let me ask real quick, can I get a thumbs up if we go over by about 15 minutes? Will that be okay? Cool. I think that's all the extra time we'll need. Cool. So I'm going to add holes to the bottom of my sign so that I can mount it onto a Rev channel. But if I look closely, I don't have a lot of space down here. So what I really need to do is kind of make my slab taller. And I can actually do that by going on the left. I'm going to select, I'm going to select the sketch, the very first sketch we made. I'm going to highlight it, and I'm actually going to double click it. And I can go in there and actually edit the original slab. I can go in and change the dimensions I had sketched the first time. So instead of doing 6.4, I can change that to 7 centimeters. Remember, the competition manual only specifies the minimum size for your sign. You can make it bigger. So all I've done here is I've kept it the same width, but I'm going to make my sign taller. And the reason I did that is I want to be able to have some space to add some holes to it. So I'm going to click OK. And I notice now that I've actually got some space down here below my numbers. Remember, one of the things we did earlier is when we did the second sketch, we made sure the distance between the top and the numbers was the minimum requirement for the competition manual. When we made our slab taller, it kept that distance set and it added the extra material to the bottom of this. All right. To add some holes, we're actually going to introduce a third sketch. So I'm going to hit the sketch option on the top left again. As always, I need to find my sketch plane. I'm going to click on the front of my drawing here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in some holes. For reference, I'm going to take that line, just like we did with our smiley face. I'm going to draw a line down the middle, but I want to use it as a reference line. So what I need to do is turn it into a construction line. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make holes around that construction line so it's nice and symmetric about it. Then what I'll do is I'll just draw in some circles. I'm going to draw just one for the moment. I'm going to draw it on here. And what we realized from the rev part is the diameter of this. Oops, I'm going to have to change my dimension tool. My dimension of this diameter needs to be 0.32 centimeters. Yep, centimeters. And notice that it did move out of the way. So I'm just gonna have to click and drag it back up. You come with me. Come with me. Come with me. Why are you not coming? Oh, do I have a tool? Oh, I do have a tool on. All right. When it's fighting with it, I'm gonna just kill it. I'm gonna put another circle in. There we go. So I put a hole in it. Now, again, if you might ask me, where did I get that hole size? Remember when I was over on the rev part, when I clicked on one of these holes, and it's yellow here, I see that its diameter is 0.32 centimeters on the bottom right of the screen. It tells me how big of a diameter that is. So when I draw this hole in there, I made it 0.32 centimeters to match that. Now, the thing is, it's still blue, so I need to give it one more constraint. I need to tell it how far away to put it. And so I'm going to actually put it at a 0.5 centimeter above the bottom. And now everything is black. What I've done is I've constrained that hole to be right in the middle of my slab, a 0.5 centimeter off the bottom, and it's got the correct diameter to match the diameter of the rev holes. Now I'm going to perform some magic. Oh, right. How do you change the dimensions? Remember, come to change the dimensions, go to your hamburger on the top left. You'll come down to workspace units. And you'll click on that, and then you can change it to centimeters. Cool. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually use a little bit of magic to make more holes. I'm going to come up here inside of my sketch. I'm going to use this thing called a linear pattern. I'm going to click on the linear pattern tool, click on my circle, and you see I get a whole bunch of craziness on here. The first thing I want to do is I want to set how far apart are each of my holes. Well, again, from the rev part, we found that they are spaced by 1.600 centimeters. And I want to specify how many of them. I want to make 5 instances of it to the right. And then I'm going to hit on the white space. And all of a sudden, I now have 5 holes to the right. Each of them are separated by 1.6 centimeters. And there's 5 instances of it spanning off of that center line. Again, where the 1.6 came from is if I come to the rev part, I click on a hole, I click on another hole, and I look down here, I see at the bottom right, it says that they are separated by 1.6 centimeters. Center to center. And that's where this came from. I made 5 instances of it just because that seems to get it pretty close to the edge of the slab. To get 5 to the left, I could repeat the linear, but I'm actually going to use the other tool. I'm going to use mirror. And mirror works like that symmetry constraint. I'm going to first click on the centerpiece. And then I'm going to click on each of these holes one at a time. And all of a sudden, I've now got a nice set of alignment holes across the bottom of my slab. These holes are the right diameter to match a Rev C channel. There's space to match the Rev C channel. I am all done with this slab with this sketch. So I'm going to confirm it. Yep. Give it a nice view. I know it makes it look like the holes disappeared. It's just again, it's like think about writing with pencil on a piece of wood. It's they're just faint. But as a last bit, I'm going to extrude those holes out. So I'm going to start a new extrusion. I need to pick my surface. Well, I'm going to do the sketch 3 as my faces. I'm extruding, and it quickly defaults as being added on these little holes as they're actually sticking out. I'm going to remove holes. So I can switch over to remove. Notice that the arrow automatically flips. Now, this should work, but I'm actually going to change blind from through all. And then I don't have to specify a depth. It's just automatically going to cut all the way through. It's going to drill a hole all the way through my slab and remove the space in those holes outright. And I hit OK. And there we go. I now have an object that is ready for 3D printing. One quick thing to make it look pretty. There is this thing called a fillet. A fillet is a way to round off your edges. So if you wanted to round off your edges, you could click on the fillet. And then I can go around and select my edges that I want to fillet. Might have to pan and scroll around a little bit to see them all. Once I've identified them, I can select the depth. I'm going to just leave the default in. When I hit OK, the fillet you see kind of rounded off my edges. Makes it a little bit more pretty. Yeah. And you see I got my holes across the bottom, so I could quickly mount this onto my robot. And I'm ready to go. The last important step here is now that we've designed this thing inside of Onshape, what we need to do is export it because we need to send it off to a 3D printer. And it turns out that's a really easy step. I'm going to go down to the bottom left of the on the tab for it, right click and hit export. I get a new window, which I can now name the part. So I'm going to name it here robot sign. The format is I want to send it to a 3D printer. So I'm on an STL file. I want to take note of what are the units I used here, because you're going to send this exported file into yet another software program, one designed to set it up to be 3D printed. You need to know what size you're exporting in so that you make sure it matches up with your 3D printer's assumption. So I just noted it's in I could change it to centimeters. I can leave it in millimeters. Just make sure you note the size that it's exporting out. And then I hit export. Off it goes to my computer. Remember, you're using a web browser, so it's going to download it to wherever you download files natively for your web browser, and you're all set to go. This is a robot sign for you to use. I know it kind of went fast there. Is there any questions, concerns, or things you want me to redo real quick? Export. So way you do it is I went down and it's actually on the tab itself. You don't see it. What you do is you right click on the tab and you get a menu there. And there's an export option that pops up there. And when you click on that, you get this. Now, the other way you can do it, I should say this in general, Onshape has multiple ways to do the same thing. The other way I could have done it is I can come over here and actually, go on the part itself listed here. And if I right click on it, there's an export option there. So they're all multiple ways. But the way I was showing it is I right clicked on it from the bottom tab itself. Yeah. Good question. Other questions? Yeah. I know we kind of rushed here at the end. Let me just last few slides, and then we're all done for today. And come back over to here. I just want to show this on the screen. We're not going to cover it now. You can actually change the color of your viewing on the Onshape. So if you want to see what it would look like if it was, say, the Blue Alliance, you can change the color of your design. You can even change the color of the different sketches. So you can look at and see what it might look like as a Blue Alliance with white lettering. You can change it to make it look like it's a Red Alliance with white lettering as well. It's just peripheral. It doesn't actually do anything but other than what it looks like inside of Onshape. So to wrap things up today, what I want to just talk about is that you have resources available to you. Today was a very rapid crash course on how to use Onshape as a CAD tool for you. If you go to the First Inspires website, go under the game and season section, and then go under the robot building section, there are CAD resources for you. And they're not just for Onshape. They also have Autodesk, they also have SolidWorks there, and they have other resources for you. So you can go to this website, grab some resources based on the CADing software of your choice. If you actually click on the CAD resources link on the left, it takes you to the documentation center for First Tech Challenge. And in there, they have more resources specific to your desired software. So you do see there's FTC Onshape in there. There's also the SolidWorks. There's Autodesk Fusion 360. There's Trimble now in there. So you have some resources for you to share. Onshape has an amazing catalog of mini courses for you to learn things. Everything I've learned about Onshape, I taught myself. And I did it through just going through these workshops. They're really short, 4-ish, 5 hours to complete all of one of the sessions at most. Or if you want to go into just one little topic, you can do that in 10, 15 minutes. So you can go into their course catalog. You can get into courses like this one here, where they'll talk about certain features of Onshape and how to use it. It is super user-friendly. Anybody can do this. They're extremely accessible. They're very well written. I was very impressed with how well these tutorials are written. Again, each individual session is only like 5 to 10 minutes, so it's very brief. When you put them all together, you can do an entire course in 4 to 5 hours. It's really good. They also have, you can get certificates out of it. So if you want to build your resume, especially if you're going to college, you might want to say how much is Onshape you've actually completed. You can actually get a formal certificate in Onshape as well. That will cost $100 to take their test. Lastly, Onshape has what they call learning pathways. So if you're completely new to Onshape or CADing, they have an entire what they call learning pathway, which is a collection of courses that kind of take you from let's sign you up an account to now you're doing a full assembly of parts. It really is a nice sequential set of steps. And in fact, one of the pathways they have is for robotics. They have an entire learning pathway for CAD for robotics. It's a really good course for you to go through. It is very specific to FIRST. So you'll see FTC and you will see FRC elements in there. Again, a really good learning tool. If you're bored over the weekend or have some free time at school, it's a great tool to kind of check out. Lastly, the last thing I want to just share is there's this great blog post here on how to onboard your first robotics team using Onshape. In one spot, if there's any go-to resource, I would point you to this. Go to this page. It's a one-stop shop. It starts you from the very beginning and walks you through everything you need to do with Onshape relative to first is a really wonderful way to begin and even get through all the way to the end. So I just want to share this resource for everyone. Difference between FTC and FRC is basically the size of the robots and the size of the team. FTC robots, are 18 inches to a side. FRC robots, they can be up to 120, 130 pounds, 4 feet tall, depending on the game. The electronics, you're using different electronics, but fundamentally they do the same thing. You're still dealing with mostly the same vendors. So you're still dealing with Rev and AndyMark as your main vendors. FRC really is just a bigger scale robot. Now, when you get into it, the really big difference between FRC and FTC is in FRC, the parts you buy are ready to be attached to your robot. So they are prefabricated. So you see like there's holes in your extrusions. There's already mounts and everything. FRC, you have to do more fabrication of those parts. And so with FRC, you're going to do more 3D printing, but more actual metal cutting and metal drilling than you would with FTC. Yeah. But when it comes to Onshape, they're really almost the same. Yeah. Almost. A hedge. All right, as I promised, I only wanted 15 extra minutes of your time. I am done. I really appreciate everyone coming out on this Saturday. To remind everyone again, these slides are available to you online. So all of my slides that walk you through all of the steps. So even the stuff I didn't show you, I've got slides for all of those constraints. So for example, for building the face, I've got individual slides in my presentation with notes to talk you through how to do this. So if you did fall behind or something went awry, you can go through my slides and I walk you through step by step how to reconstruct this. And you have the presenter notes to go with it to describe all of those steps. So again, if you thought this was useful and you need to go back and kind of look at some of the material, the slides are available to you in that QR code. Feel free to download them. If you have any questions, please email me. Let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. I know Angelo, who's on here as well, is pretty good with this stuff. In fact, I've learned quite a bit from Angelo. So let us know if you have any questions. All right, we are over time. I'm going to stay on. If you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to unmute yourself. We have a small crowd here. Type them in the chat. Let me know what your thoughts are. Otherwise, I hope to see you at a future event. Thanks, everyone.